I used to believe I had everything a woman could ever ask for. A loving husband, a cozy home, and the kind of life that felt almost like a dream. Ethan and I had been married for 5 years, and during those years, he had been my best friend, my partner, and the person I trusted most in this world. When I think back to our early days, I can still see us sitting on the porch of our little apartment, drinking cheap coffee, and laughing about how broke we were. None of it mattered because we had each other, and that was more than enough. When Ethan asked me to marry him, I didn't even hesitate. He was charming, thoughtful, and he had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the room. Our wedding was small, surrounded only by family and a few close friends. One of those friends was Madison Clark. She had been my best friend since college. Madison was the kind of friend who always knew how to cheer me up, who answered my late-night calls, and who celebrated every milestone in my life as if it were her own. It felt comforting to know she would always be part of my story, too. The first few years of marriage were wonderful. Ethan and I dreamed of traveling, starting a family, and building a future together. Madison was always around, supporting me, supporting us. She would spend weekends at our place, cooking with me in the kitchen while Ethan played music in the background. We laughed, we shared secrets, and I trusted both of them more than I trusted anyone else. But over time, little things started to change. Ethan began working later hours. At first, I didn't think much of it. He had always been ambitious, and I admired that about him. But soon, the late nights became more frequent. He started coming home distracted, barely talking, and when I asked how his day was, his answers were short, almost rehearsed. I told myself it was just work stress. That's what any good wife would believe, right? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were moments when Madison seemed a little too comfortable around Ethan. She'd casually touch his arm when she laughed or share inside jokes I didn't quite understand. Once, I walked into the kitchen and found them standing closer than they should have been, whispering about something. They quickly stepped apart when I entered, smiling like nothing had happened. I laughed it off in the moment, not wanting to seem paranoid. These were the two people I trusted most in the world. Why would I ever doubt them? But the signs were there, even if I didn't want to see them. I remember one evening, Ethan came home late, and as I hugged him, I noticed a faint smell of perfume on his shirt. It wasn't mine. It was a scent I recognized, one that Madison often wore. My heart sank, but I pushed the thought away. Madison had been at our house earlier that week. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was imagining it. Still, doubts crept into my mind, whispering questions I didn't want to ask. Why was Madison suddenly spending so much time at our place when Ethan was home, instead of when he wasn't? Why did she stop talking to me as much, yet seem to text Ethan constantly? One afternoon, I walked past Ethan's phone as it buzzed on the counter. A message flashed across the screen. It was from Madison. Before I could read it, he grabbed the phone and tucked it into his pocket, pretending nothing had happened. He smiled at me, but his eyes didn't meet mine. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I reminded myself that I had always trusted Ethan, and Madison had been my friend for years. Maybe I was being insecure. Maybe the stress of daily life was clouding my mind. Still, the unease in my chest never left. The moment that truly shook me happened late one night. I had gone to bed early, exhausted after a long day. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty and went downstairs for a glass of water. As I stepped into the living room, I froze. Madison was sitting on the couch beside Ethan. They were talking quietly, their faces close. And then, as if sensing me, Madison pulled her hand away from his, almost too quickly. Both of them looked up at me, startled, and then smiled like nothing was wrong. I stood there, holding my glass of water, pretending I hadn't noticed. Pretending my heart wasn't pounding in my chest. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that maybe I had interrupted a simple, innocent conversation between two people who cared about me. I forced a smile, made a weak excuse about not being able to sleep, and went back upstairs. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't close my eyes. The image of Madison's hand slipping away from Ethan's burned in my mind. I whispered to myself, "It's nothing. It has to be nothing. But deep down, I knew something was changing. Something I wasn't ready to face. The days after that night felt like a slow unraveling of everything I once believed. I tried to convince myself that what I saw meant nothing, but the doubt was there, gnawing at me in every quiet moment. Ethan had become even more distant. His eyes, once full of warmth, now seemed tired and evasive. When I asked him about work, he would shrug, mumble a few words, and then change the subject. It felt like he was building a wall between us, brick by brick, and I didn't know how to climb over it. Madison, too, had changed. She no longer called me the way she used to. When we did talk, her laughter felt forced, her words rushed. She avoided my eyes, even when she sat right in front of me. It was as if the closeness we had built over years of friendship was evaporating, leaving behind only awkward silences and nervous smiles. I told myself it was stress, that maybe I was being unfair. But deep down, my instincts screamed at me that something was terribly wrong. One evening, after dinner, I finally gathered the courage to confront Ethan. My hands shook as I dried the dishes, my voice trembling as I asked, "Ethan, is there something you're not telling me?" He looked up, startled, and for a brief second, I saw guilt flicker across his face. But then he smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Jessica, you're overthinking again. You know I love you. Don't let your imagination ruin what we have." His words should have reassured me, but instead, they cut me deeper. He wasn't denying with love, he was deflecting with guilt. That night, I lay awake in bed while Ethan slept peacefully beside me. Silent tears ran down my face. I hated myself for doubting him. I hated myself for doubting Madison. But what I hated most was the growing certainty inside me that I wasn't wrong. Something was happening, and I was being kept in the dark. The next day, I noticed Ethan's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while he showered. My heart pounded as I glanced at the screen. A message popped up from Madison. My stomach twisted. I couldn't see the full text, but I caught enough. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My breath caught in my throat. Tonight? What could she possibly mean? My hands shook as I set the phone back down, terrified that he might catch me looking. The truth was there, staring me in the face. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But instead, I said nothing. I needed proof. I needed to see with my own eyes, to hear with my own ears. Otherwise, he would twist the truth again, make me feel guilty, and I would hate myself for questioning him. That evening, Ethan claimed he had a late meeting at work. He kissed my forehead and walked out the door, just like he always did. But this time I didn't stay home. I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my keys, and followed him. My heart raced as I drove slowly, keeping a safe distance. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel, my stomach churning with dread. He didn't drive to the office. Instead, he pulled into the parking lot of a small hotel restaurant on the edge of town. I parked far enough away that he wouldn't notice me, but close enough that I could see everything. And then I saw her, Madison. She was waiting just outside the entrance, her hair loose, her smile wide. Ethan walked up to her, and without hesitation, he reached for her hand. They laughed, their fingers entwined like lovers, and walked inside together. In that moment, the world around me seemed to disappear. My chest tightened, my vision blurred with tears. I couldn't breathe. The man I loved, the man I trusted, was with the woman who had been my best friend. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air in the darkness of my car. I wanted to run inside and scream at them both. I wanted to demand answers, to shatter the illusion they had built. But my body refused to move. Instead, I sat there in silence, my tears falling onto the steering wheel. My heart whispered the words I had been too afraid to say out loud. "Please stop. Please don't do this to me." But Ethan didn't stop. He walked into that hotel with Madison by his side, leaving me alone in the parking lot with my breaking heart. Hours later, I drove home, my eyes swollen from crying, my hands trembling on the wheel. The image of them together replayed in my mind over and over again, like a cruel movie I couldn't turn off. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I felt hollow, like a shell of the woman I used to be. That night, lying in bed alone, I finally whispered the truth to myself. I begged him to stop, and he never stopped. The morning after I followed Ethan to the hotel, everything felt different. The sun still rose, the coffee still brewed, and the world outside carried on as if nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. I wasn't the same woman who believed in her husband, who trusted her best friend. I was someone broken, standing in the ruins of two relationships I thought were unshakable. When Ethan came home that night, he pretended nothing had happened. He walked in with his usual half-smile, kissed my cheek, and asked about dinner. I wanted to scream, to demand why his lips tasted like Madison's perfume, why his hands carried the warmth of someone else's touch. Instead, I played along, setting a plate in front of him, nodding as he told me a story about his meeting. My silence was heavy, but he didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. For days, I carried the secret of what I had seen, weighing whether to confront him or to keep pretending. But every time I looked at him, my chest tightened. Every time Madison's name appeared on my phone, my stomach turned. I couldn't live like this, not knowing, not speaking, not breathing. So one evening, I finally broke the silence. I waited until Ethan was home, sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone. My voice shook as I said his name. Ethan, I know. He looked up slowly, his brow furrowed. You know what? I know about you and Madison, I whispered, my throat tightening around the words. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. His face paled, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then he laughed nervously, shaking his head. Jessica, you're imagining things again. Madison's your best friend. She'd never. Stop lying. I cut him off, my voice breaking. I saw you. I followed you. I watched you walk into that hotel with her. The color drained from his face completely. His phone slipped from his hand, landing on the table with a dull thud. For the first time, Ethan didn't have an excuse ready. He didn't deny it. He didn't fight back. He just sat there in silence, his guilt louder than any words he could have spoken. I felt tears burning my eyes as I continued. Do you have any idea what you've done? She was my best friend. You were my husband. And the two of you destroyed everything. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low and uneven. It just happened, Jessica. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Those words cut deeper than a knife. It just happened. As if love was an accident, as if betrayal was a stumble in the dark instead of a choice he made over and over again. Madison didn't just happen. The lies, the secret meetings, the late nights, they didn't just fall from the sky. He chose them. He chose her. And in doing so, he didn't choose me. I remember whispering, more to myself than to him. I begged you to stop. I begged you in every look, in every tear, in every moment I tried to save us. And you never stopped. Ethan reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled away. His touch felt foreign now, like it belonged to someone else. I couldn't bear to look at him, not when every glance reminded me of Madison's smile, of their laughter together. The next day, I met Madison. I asked her to come over, and she did, walking through my front door with the same ease she always had. But this time, her eyes avoided mine, her smile was thin, and her presence felt heavy. I asked her one question. How could you? For a moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. Jessica, I didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Didn't mean to hurt me? You betrayed me in the worst way possible. You took the man I loved and the friendship I cherished and turned them both into lies. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just sat there in silence, her guilt filling the room. And in that silence, I realized something important. No explanation, no apology, no excuse could ever undo what they had done. That evening, I packed a bag. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I simply walked away. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not to hold on, but to let go. The nights that followed were the hardest of my life. I cried until my body ached, replaying every memory of Ethan and me, every laugh Madison and I had shared. But slowly, the tears became less frequent. The silence that once felt suffocating began to feel like peace. And in that quiet, I started to hear something I hadn't heard in a long time, my own voice. I learned that infidelity doesn't just shatter marriages. It shatters trust, self-worth, and the very foundation of who we are. But I also learned that betrayal doesn't define me. I am not the mistakes of my husband. I am not the choices of my friend. I am Jessica Miller, and I am more than the pain they caused me. If you're listening to my story, I want you to remember this. Love should never feel like begging. If you find yourself pleading for honesty, for loyalty, for basic respect, you're not asking for too much. You're just asking the wrong person. Ethan never stopped. Madison never stopped. But I did. I stopped waiting. I stopped hurting. And finally, I stopped loving a man who was never truly mine.